we are going to have a look at CVs, and I'm hopefully going to give you all some really practical advice with regards to CVs, specifically for the games industry and specifically for those at a graduate sort of junior level as well. As I said, I'm going to talk about how to build a graduate CV for the games industry. The very first point that I'd probably like to make with regards to CVs is that while they are important, on the most part, they're probably not as important as your portfolio. I am told time and time again by hiring managers at lots of different studios that the CV is generally secondary to a strong portfolio, especially at a graduate level, because for the most part, most of your CV is going to be roughly the same. So while I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes, half an hour talking about CVs, don't get too hung up on them because, actually, they're not going to be as important. Also, there is a lot of conflicting advice out there. It can be an absolute minefield, and trying to get an honest answer can be difficult. There is no perfect way to structure your CV. There's no way to structure your CV to guarantee an interview. That magic formula just does not exist. I hate to burst your bubble if you think that's the case. If you Google how do I write a good CV, you will come up with thousands of different articles and such, and loads of templates and loads of people offering you paid services to write your CV that will guarantee you get a job. It doesn't exist. What I'm going to hopefully tell you today is it won't be perfect, and there'll be bits in there that will change for you. However, it's probably based on my personal experience of being in recruitment for a number of years now, and our experience at Grads and Games of building a CV for the games industry for graduates. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to give you some points which will help you tailor your CV specifically to the industry and specifically to the kind of jobs that I'm sure a lot of you are going to be going for. So to do this, I'm first going to show you a good example of a CV. Now, if anyone's ever watched any of our content before, you would have seen this CV already. This is a guy called Jake Missing. He graduated a few years ago, and then he immediately transitioned into his first industry role. With permission, we use his CV just because it's a brilliant example of being able to show off the kinds of things that studios are looking for. First things first, about CV, your portfolio needs to be clear at the top of the document. Don't hide this away in between, contacts like your email and phone number and such. Don't hide it away somewhere in the middle. As I've said, as an employer, the very first thing they want to see is your work. So make it easy as possible so they can open it, click on your CV straight away. Don't make it difficult. After this, you should probably write a short paragraph, a little bit of a profile about you. Nowadays, it used to be commonplace that you used to have to write covering letters for every kind of job, and they, used to have to write your whole story out. Nowadays, you really have to listen to what the studio is asking for. Some studios will want to see a cover letter. Other studios will not want to see a cover letter, and if you send one, it might not get read. So it's always best to have a short, concise profile on the top of your CV, showcasing who you are, what you want to do. Just get straight to the point. Tell us about any achievements that you've had, and why you're applying for whatever role you're applying for. Underneath this is where you should list your technical skills, and keep this to only technical skills. Don't be tempted to add in any soft skills in this piece. So, lots of people will put, I'm a great communicator, stuff like that. The reality is that if you put that you're a great communicator in a list, you're not telling me you're a great communicator. All you're doing is putting it in a list. I would, for those kinds of skills, I would need to see examples of your communication skills. And I'm going to come on to that in a minute and tell you how to do those in a little bit. One additional point for this, and this is a bugbear I know for lots of recruiters, lots of hiring managers out there. Don't be tempted to put any kind of ranking system into these skills. So I've seen them all over the years. I'm 4 stars out of 5, or 3 dots out of 10, or I've got 26% good on this skill. Just don't do it. First thing, um, all it does is it tells me what you can't do. I'm immediately drawn to what are the lowest ones. Make sure that's the very first thing that I can see. Also, who are you rating yourself against? How do you know where you rate? You might think that you're 5 dots out of 5. However, you may get into a studio and you may quickly realise that you're not 5 dots out of 5 on that particular tool. Don't compare yourself. Don't think you have to rate yourself. Just put what you've had experience of using, and don't worry if it's not much experience either. At the end of the day, and we've had speakers say this already. At the end of the day, you're graduates. A lot of people who are listening today are going to be graduates. No one is expecting you to be an expert at anything. You're not coming in with 20 years experience of making AAA games. Nobody's expecting you to be an absolute expert. So just don't worry about it. People are not expecting it. Just put what you've had experience using, even if it's only a little bit. If a studio wants particular experience on something, if you put it on there, they'll probably question you on it. They'll probably say, "Oh, I can see you've used Maya before. How much have you done?" Hopefully, you'll be able to showcase some of that in your portfolio, which will answer that question. But no one's expecting you to say how much of it you've used. Next, I would include any relevant experience. So generally, this is going to be experience working in games or in a game studio. So this could be an internship, it could be work experience, it could be freelance work, it could be game jams. At this point, for most employers, it's probably more important than your degree. The actual mark that you get on your degree is probably not that important. It's more important with regards to what you can actually do. So any experience that you've had where you can show that is great. Be really detailed here and tell us exactly what you've done. If you were lucky enough to secure an internship in a game studio, you will know that you don't just make tea and coffee for 3 months. You work on the game. You actually do the job that you've been brought in to do. So don't be afraid to tell us everything that you did. Tell us what you've had exposure to use. Next is where I would put your education, and obviously, generally we work here at Grads and Games mostly with people at university. So your degree is probably going to be the most important thing. Keep it clear and simple. Add dates and grades too, especially if they're really good. But don't feel like you need to list everything you've ever done. You might want to give us a little snapshot of some of the most relevant stuff that you've done. But I know from when I was at uni, you do a lot of stuff which isn't necessarily entirely relevant to the actual job that you're going to end up doing. So you don't have to put everything. Just put stuff that's relevant. Keep it nice and to the point. You can also include your other qualifications, GCSEs, A levels, that kind of thing. But just be aware that they're not as relevant as your degree or whatever you've studied last. So just keep it really simple and clean. In the next section would be where you would include any other work experience you have. So this is where I'm talking about being able to showcase some of those softer skills like communication and stuff, right? So if you have ever worked in a shop or in a bar or a cafe, this is where you would include that. Even though it's not specifically about making games or game development of any kind, you are developing skills which will be sought after by employers. You don't need to be really detailed and tell us every single task you did. If you worked in Asda stocking shelves, then I don't need to know the real ins and outs of exactly what the task was. We can probably work it out. However, what you want to do is tailor this towards actually the kind of skills you want to show off. Teamwork, communication, these are key skills. So I want to hear about how you really enjoyed working as part of a team. how you really enjoyed communicating with customers, colleagues. I want to hear about this kind of stuff. These are good values that are wanted in game studios. So being able to showcase real life examples of these in some kind of professional working environment, that's a really positive thing, and that's something that you can show off. And this is why you wouldn't put those skills in a list. This is where you would put them and be able to showcase some of the skills. The final piece of a good CV is that we recommend to include a hobbies and interests section. You'll be surprised just how many people just don't include this, or they just write a bullet pointed list of activities. This is where you can get across your passion for games and game development more specifically, and it can be a small indicator of who you are and why somebody would want to hire you. It might be a good idea if you want to work in games industry to mention you like playing games. You'll be surprised just how many people just don't do that because they think it's not professional, or it's not the place for it. You're trying to get into the games industry. Most people who work in the games industry like games of some sort. So you've already got a common interest with a lot of people. So be honest. Tell us what kind of games you like playing. Tell us what got you interested in game development. Why are you applying for these jobs? Why are you wanting to do this and not wanting to go work in a bank or something else? Tell us a little bit about who you are. We use this CV here because it's a great example because of the layout, but also because of Jake's hobbies section. So if you look in here, you can see that Jake mentions VR quite a few times, how it influenced his work and his studies, how he really enjoys it, how it's something that that got him interested. Jake actually ended up going to get a job at Endreams straight after uni, working on VR games. Now, I'm not going to say that it's because of this bit, but this bit would have certainly helped. This part of his CV would have certainly helped him develop, certainly helped him get an interest because obviously he showed an interest in the kind of stuff that they do. So being able to showcase that is a really good way and showing why you want to do what you want to do. Now, I've shown you a good CV, so I suppose in the matter of balance, I'm probably going to show you a couple of bad examples of CVs, so you can see the difference. I've taken all the contact details of this. I've anonymized them. They've come from Google, so if anybody sees their CV up here, it's totally not my fault. I've just Googled bad CVs on Google, so we'll see. This is the first one. I'm hoping this is going to be probably going to be a little bit obvious. You can see it's pretty bare. There's not an awful lot in there. There's no intro whatsoever, so this just straight into a list of stuff. In this case, it's work experience, it's some education, but with no real kind of headers, no detail with regards to what this person was either working as or what they studied in, or it's literally just a list of words, just a list of stuff. There's no breakdown of skills, so as a hiring manager, this doesn't really tell me anything at all, and everything is just buried. There is a portfolio link, believe it or not, but it's buried 3/4 of the way down the page. There is also a little bit more info at the bottom, which is telling them about who they are. But once again, it's just all very generic, very buried. Ultimately, this person has put zero effort into this CV. They've just pulled stuff off and listed it. Overall, if I was a hiring manager, I wouldn't take a second look at this. It doesn't differentiate the person in any way from the 300 people applying for the same role that they are. Hopefully, this is a bit more of an obvious one to see why it's no good. Slightly better example here, but it still has some flaws. So this person has once again gone straight into lists. There's not much more detail than the last CV, even though it may look busier. It is just a list of stuff. Take the opportunity to tell who you are. Tell us what you want to do. We also have rankings against the skill set. As I said, I know it's tempting to try and show off some sort of graphic design skills, but it's just really not necessary. When I look at this CV, the very first thing that I'm drawn towards is that this person might not be particularly good at Photoshop or JavaScript, PHP or MySQL. But also, who are they ranking themselves against? What do these dots mean? What does it mean when someone says they're 5 dots out of 5 on Adobe? It just doesn't tell me anything. The main thing with this CV, though, is just a lack of context. It seemingly just tries to wedge in as many words as possible without actually providing any context as to how they relate to this person. But say you're good at using questionnaires, I want to see examples of where you can show me how you've used them. Like this, that's what this person has done. Tell me what success you've had. It's just a bunch of keywords in that presumably are crammed into one page because they've been told that they need to do so. Nobody's going to judge you for having one-page CV or for having 2 or 3 pages as a CV. You don't need to cram everything in. Everything looks squashed. This is why there's just no detail. There's just no context to anything. As a hiring manager, this just tells me nothing, and I'm just not going to be reading it that closely. Final example. This one here is probably the polar opposite to the first one that we looked at. This person's trying far too hard. Your CV is where you lay out who you are, your background, your experience, your skills. It's not where you show off your artistic work. So if you're an artist, your CV is not where you show off your art skills. That's for your portfolio. That's where you can show off what you can do. I appreciate many people will think, oh, this will make me stand out. Everyone else will have a generic, black and white CV. But as a hiring manager, I'm looking at your portfolio for that. And as your CV, I just want to be able to quickly scan, find the information I need. This CV is so hard to follow. It just doesn't provide you any of the detail that you need. And yeah, it's just not got the basics of what you need. So don't do this, basically. So final things. Now we've looked at some really bad CVs. I want to try and cover some of the really common CV myths and misconceptions that you see out there, because there are a lot of them. There is, and a lot of them come from advice from years ago, or just poor advice, people not really understanding what happens in the industry, what happens in the real world. So I'm hopefully going to start trying to address some of them here. First one, really common. You can't have a CV that's longer than 1 page. This is simply just not true. You obviously have to consider that nobody's going to really read a 20-page CV or probably a 10-page CV. That's too much. But at the same time, laying things out over 2 pages, 3 pages, making it easier to navigate and read, and that it presents well, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to leave off important information or be really fiddling very carefully with the margins and the font and everything to try and cram everything into 1 page because you've been told you need to keep everything in 1 page. You really don't. Keywords is another one. You will hear some people preaching about having a certain amount of keywords in your CV. And while it can be important to show off the right kind of skills and experience a company said they're looking for, you don't need to just cram them in for the sake of it. If you have the right skill set, then those keywords will exist in your CV anyway. But you don't need to just add them in just to make sure that you've got them. And this feeds nicely into the second point, which is your CV does not just get checked and rejected by computer software. I've been in recruitment 7 years myself. I've worked with people who've been in a lot longer. I can tell you that, I'm sure it might happen in some parts of the world, in some massive companies, but I think if you speak to any recruiter, any real recruiter in the industry, this just doesn't happen. We don't just get fed, a load of CVs that have passed checks because they've got a certain amount of keywords in, and any ones that don't get rejected. That just doesn't happen. Your CV gets read, it gets seen by a real person, I would say on 99% of the time. That is what happens. Ultimately, it's that person who will make a judgment on your CV. So they'll be looking for a few things because there is a filtering job to do, but you don't need to put keywords in just to be able to get past the AI computer software. That doesn't happen in the real world, I can tell you. Final one, you need to include everything. You don't. You don't need to include everything on your CV. Your CV is not your autobiography. You don't need to include absolutely everything you've ever done. You want to tailor it towards what you're actually applying for. You want to be able to show off different parts of your experience, different skills, but ultimately, it needs to be relevant to what you're applying for right now. If you did a 1 week work placement when you were 15 at school, I don't know, I did my work placement at a gym. I wouldn't put it on my CV now. It means nothing. If I was applying for a graduate artist in a game studio, not relevant at all. You don't have to include it. Just put the stuff on that's relevant to you, but make sure that you can show off everything that they need to know about you that makes you suitable for the job that you're applying for. That is everything. I appreciate that's probably a bit of a whistle-stop tour with regards to writing CVs, but I'm hoping that you've all picked up some key things. One of the key things that I want to get across is that there's no one advice that fits everybody. All right, not everyone has the same CV. Not the advice that I give today. There'll be bits in it that work for you that won't work for someone else. But hopefully you picked up a few different pointers about maybe what to do and what not to do. If you are looking for a personalized CV or portfolio review, then you need to speak to our recruitment partner, Aardvark Swift. They're the ones who'll be able to get in touch with, send them your CV, and they'll be able to have a look at it. You can get them on the email address there. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I have a feeling we'll probably go some questions, and I think there'll be probably a few questions coming from this. So let's have a look at them, shall we? Oh god, that's a lot of questions to work through. Right, hold on. I think I've covered a lot of these, fortunately. So here we go. This is why we get all the time from Gross. Does it look bad if I don't have any relevant experience in the games industry? No. I talk about internships, and we talk about getting an internship or getting work experience, pre-graduation, that kind of thing. It's really hard. The spaces are limited. If you don't secure something, you're not in the minority. You're in the majority. There are a lot of people who don't manage to secure an internship in the games industry. So don't feel disheartened if you don't, because actually there's a lot of people who've done the same. But use being able to show off what you have done is great. So any stuff you're doing in your personal time, we always encourage people to be doing stuff outside of university. We've talked about game jams earlier today. Game jams are a perfect example. Talking about that, any kind of freelance projects, anything like that can be classed as experience. It doesn't need to be paid salaried experience. It could be it could be anything to do with just being involved in the process of making games. That's good enough. Nobody is expecting you to have anything else. And let me have a look. So, I mean, it's an easy one. So Daniel's asked, in a CV, would you have a project section with links to your portfolio, or would you advise against it? Yeah, you can. If you've got, you can certainly highlight a couple of projects if you really want to highlight them for it could be for a number of reasons. One way I've seen this done really well is, say you have won some kind of award for a game that you've made, or for a project or whatever. You won a game jam, or you won Search for a Star, or you placed in the rookies, or something like that. You might want to include that as a key achievement. That's really good. But you don't need to have a full list of all the projects that you've done. That will be on your portfolio, and people will click through and see it on your portfolio anyway. But if you want to particularly highlight some because they're a key achievement, or because they maybe relate very closely to the studio you're applying for, if you know that they, take what Alex was talking about earlier. If you're applying to Mediatonic, and obviously Fall Guys is their big project right now. If you are applying there, you may want to highlight some of the really more fun, stylized stuff in your portfolio, and you may want to show that off a bit more so that they make sure they see it. So that can be a way to do it, but you just got to use some common sense, really, most of the time. So there's been a couple of questions like this. So Liam's asked, any tips on grads from different degrees? So my background is events, but I've been programming, learning C# in my own time, and I have a lot of transferable skills. Yeah, the key thing there, there's a couple of key things. Is the transferable skills, first of all, and the fact that you've been doing programming, learning C#. I said it right at the beginning, and I'll say it again. Ultimately, your portfolio is more important than your CV. It's more important than what degree you do for most studios. It's more important than what grade you got in your degree. It's you want to show off what you can do. I guarantee if I spoke to hiring managers at any studios today and I asked them that if someone didn't have a degree but they had a great portfolio, would you still look at them? Of course they would. It's more about the portfolio. If you can show that off, then you can show off exactly the kind of stuff they're looking for. So, yes, certainly the name of your degree is not that important. This one I think I answered already. So I answered when we got to it. So I don't know if this crossed over or not, but literally a lot of CVs are automatically getting rejected by ATS systems. No, that's not the case. Not in anywhere I've worked, not with anyone that I've worked with. How much influence do they have? Not a lot. A lot of the time, it's literally just a way to store data, be able to store your CV, show us lists of people who have applied for jobs. That is all it is. No, there will be lots of companies out there who are trying to reinvent the wheel and say, I'm building an AI that will do all our recruitment for us. But recruitment is a people person type of job. Your CV is dealt with by a real person. I would say on 99% of the time. I've never heard of it in person about someone being rejected or someone working at somewhere where their ATS rejects them. I would say that you need to, it's someone real who's going to look at it. They may not look at it very long, and that's one of the key things, is that you might only get maybe 30 seconds initially of someone just to quickly scan it. So that's an important point to remember. But, it ultimately is going to be a real person. So don't worry about that. Apologies. There's a lot of questions popping up and changing order on my screen, and it can be hard to it can be hard to look at. Okay, this is a good one. So, Frida's asked, personal speculations that if you don't get a job straight out of or within a year after finishing uni, it becomes more difficult to get roles related to your degree. Is this true? It doesn't make it any harder. The time is irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. It's more about actually where you at with regards to your skills and your development personally, and how good are you, how ready are you for the industry. A lot of people, once again, this comes back to the internship thing, where a lot of people don't get internships. Also, a lot of people don't get jobs directly out of uni. There are lots and lots of people who have had very successful careers who finished uni and needed more time to work on their portfolio, continue working on their skills before they could secure that role. So don't feel disheartened if you don't get a job straight away. It happens. It's a hard industry to get into. Lots of people want to work in the games industry, so it's one of those ones where the competition is high. But the key thing is not to give up. If you really want to work in the games industry, you have to continue developing your skills, continue developing that portfolio, and if you continue to build it and you continue to improve, then you will get picked up eventually. It's one of the things where you've just got to continue doing it. So yeah, the time is irrelevant. If you do your degree and then just stop and don't do anything, then yeah, your chances are just dwindling down and down. But if you continue to work on it and you continue to improve, then yeah, you're still in a good position to get a new job. Right. Jerry's asked, should I include any language qualifications in the CV? Yeah, languages can be good. I mean, you don't. Once again, it can be pretty brief. You don't need to. You don't need to. List out anything. It can literally be just a list of languages I talk, and maybe for that one, maybe there's slightly different skills where you might want to say like I'm fluent or I'm a beginner or an intermediate or something, whatever. But yeah, it can be good to add. Lots of studios, some of the biggest studios have got different offices all over the world now. So having people who they know will be able to communicate with lots of different places can be of value to some studios. There's no harm in putting it on. It's not going to be a bad thing. Barrett's asked, what do you think about using a picture in a CV? Some suggest, some don't. I would say no. You don't need to include a picture. It's just wasted space. There's a whole bucket load of reasons as to why you wouldn't want to, from a unconscious bias type of angle, where people. You could open yourself up to discrimination, possibly from people, or positive discrimination, or something like that. There's an option there. There's an argument to make for that. But ultimately, it's not important. What you look like doesn't matter to the job. It doesn't matter one bit. So, more what skills you can do. So, adding a picture on isn't making you stand out. It's just taking up space that could be used to show off some of your skills a bit better. That's my thoughts on it. So this is an interesting one. So Rowan has said, so during a UK conference, Ian Angus, Creative Assembly, said that for programmers, CV is more important than the portfolio because it's difficult to get across code in a visual manner. What are your thoughts on this? I'd probably argue that, if I'm honest. I think that for programmers, there is, if you were working on game development, there is certainly a way to get across, more visual aspects of it. We've talked about it a little bit earlier in the conference. We were talking about how you get that across. Building animated. If you built a game or a game or a game mechanic or something, having an animated GIF, having pictures, having a video, something like that. Anything, anything visual is always going to be really good. That can accompany, maybe a link to your code on GitHub somewhere. But having something like that is really powerful, because otherwise, your CV. Once again, your CV is not going to tell me an awful lot apart from what you studied, and how good you were. But that doesn't make you any different to any other programmer. So I would probably argue that and say that I don't think the CV is more important. I think it's the same thing as artists. I still think you need a visual portfolio. Just be aware that, for programming specifically, probably one of the first things that they'll take, that they'll do, and which will be the biggest kind of influence with regards to whether you go forward for an interview or not, will be a coding test. I'd be very surprised as a graduate you don't get given a coding test straight from the off. That's the first thing you do. So that's probably the biggest thing. More important. That's probably going to be more important than your portfolio and your CV. But yeah, I wouldn't say that a CV is more important than a portfolio for programmers. I think it's the same. I think the same thing applies. I've got time for a couple more. So Phoenix has asked, I'm an animation student, made a short animated film. How can I best integrate it into my portfolio? For stuff like animation or VFX, you should 100% have a showreel. Not just a portfolio of pieces. Have a showreel, but you can present that on. You can present that on ArtStation pretty easily, can't you? You can upload videos of your showreel, and you can have it there as your main thing that people look towards. So you know what I mean? You can upload it there, definitely. There's no way in which you can't input that on. Right, I've got one more. I'm just trying to find one that's got quite a lot of upvotes. I'll answer this one very quickly. Some kind of portfolio tutorial. If you check out gradsandgames.com, if you go on our video resources bit, there are tons of free video resources there, which cover how to build a portfolio from lots of different job roles. So you've got programming, art, design, VFX, etc. We've got loads of free resources up there which you can just go and access anytime. So for that, certainly go and have a look at those, go and have a look at that content. Do it after today so that you can continue watching today, certainly. Okay, so Philip's asked, so due to my circumstances, full-time parent, done all my studying through distance learning, my degree for the Open Uni, some less prestigious as other unis. Do you think it will have an impact? No. No one's going to care. As I said, no, where you studied, that kind of thing, it is not that important to employers. It's all about your work. What can you do? Show me your portfolio. If you studied at wherever, a uni that no one's ever heard of, there's only got 3 people, but you've got a fantastic portfolio, that's fine. That's great. That's just as good. There are people studying at the universities where they've got really regarded courses who are graduating and not getting jobs because they don't put the effort in. They don't build the portfolio. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of those every single year. So don't worry about where you studied. It doesn't matter to employers. There's no, it's not like in some industries where you've got like an old boys network where, well, I'll hire someone who went to the same uni as I did. that's not a thing, yeah, it doesn't matter. Don't be worried about it. Um, I think that's all the time I've got for today. Thank you very much for listening.